89. Accidental Man. Chalcedon Report number 346, May 1994. A change of culture means a change of language. The languages of Christendom have been more shaped by the Bible than people realize. Language reveals how we think or do not think. One can see in the dramatic changes in the language of youth from 1900 to the 1990s how the faith and culture of the United States has been altered. Western languages well into the 20th century reflected also the Greco-Roman heritage. The vocabulary of thought was often classical, or an attempted fusion of the Christian and the classical. In fact, there is a philosophy of language, and the discipline has a variety of emphases. What is language in essence, and what does grammar tell us about thinking? These and like questions are not our concern here, other than to point out the complexity of the subject. A related subject is vocabulary. Our vocabulary reveals the perimeters, the boundaries of our mind and of our thinking. Man has always been speaking man, from Eden to the present, never the primitive grunter of evolutionary fiction. However much some youth today seem to be imitating the fictional grunters, they remain human beings, persons, albeit sinful ones. The old vocabulary of Christendom spoke of substance and accident. Substance, Latin sub plus stare, and the Greek hupo plus stasis, to stand under, refers to the basic reality in, under, or behind things. The accident of things is that which changes, is on the surface. It is related to our idea of the accidental. The word comes from the Latin accidens, accidere, to happen, chance, a befalling, any fortuitous or non-essential property. The idea of chance was important in Greek thought. In Christian thought, the word accident came to mean non-essential. Aquinas summarized it clearly in two statements. That which is outside the substance of a thing, and yet is belonging to the thing, is called an accident of it. Again, an accident is that whose nature is to exist in another. The language of substance and accident was very important to Western thought until the rise of Darwinism. What Darwin insisted on was the sole, quote, reality, end quote, and the triumph of chance. All things developed out of nothing through chance. Now, the older scientific thinking did not even view accidents as chance. Under the influence of the Reformation view of predestination, even the accidents of things were aspects of a cosmic plan and purpose. They were not substance, but they were not chance. But with Darwin, substance was leached out of the universe and replaced with the omnipresence of chance. It was at this point that much criticism was levelled against Darwin. The world was ready to accept evolution as against God, but Darwin's theory, despite a slight bow to, quote, design, end quote, actually stressed chance variations. Thomas Huxley tried to defend Darwin at this point, declaring, "But probably the best answer to those who talk of Darwinism, meaning the reign of, quote, chance, end quote, is to ask them what they themselves understand by chance. Do they believe that anything in this universe happens without reason or without cause? Do they really conceive that any event has no cause and could not have been predicted by anyone who had a sufficient insight into the order of nature? If they do, it is they who are the inheritors of an antique superstition and ignorance, and whose minds have never been illumined by a ray of scientific thought. The one act of faith in the convert to science is validity in all times and under all circumstances of the law of causation. This confession is an act of faith because, by the nature of the case, the truth of such propositions is not susceptible of proof. But Such faith is not blind but reasonable, because it is invariably confirmed by experience and constitutes the sole trustworthy foundation for all action. Thomas Huxley, on the reception of The Origin of Species in Francis Darwin, editor, The Life and Letters of Charles Darwin, Volume 1, New York, New York, Basic Books, 1959, page 553. Huxley knew better. He used a strategy commonplace to scientists since then of accusing critics of superstition and ignorance. With great condescension, the critic is treated as a man too ignorant to know what he is criticizing, and as one who is painfully uncomprehending. The plain fact was that chance was basic to Darwin's perspective and to evolution. It still is. Hudson Hoagland, the executive director of the Worcester Foundation for Experimental Biology, wrote that there are only two answers to the question of how life began. It must either have risen spontaneously from non-living material or have been created by supernatural means. For Hoagland, the second alternative means that science has nothing to contribute, since the question cannot be resolved by the operational approaches of science. Hudson Hoagland, The Elements of Life, in Lyman Bryson, editor, An Outline of Man's Knowledge of the Modern World, Garden City, New York, Nelson Doubleday, 1960, page 152. For Hoagland, chance can explain everything. Ibid, pages 152 and 153. For him, evolution is creative, but its creativity is independent of purpose or design. Ibid, page 139. R.W. Gerard, M.S., then of the University of Michigan, held that men's morals are accidents of his time and place. Ibid, pages 73 to 89. This is a logical conclusion. The universe and all things within it have been stripped of substance. The existence of God is more than denied. It is dismissed as an unscientific and irrelevant question. Is it any wonder that all that remains of man is accidental man? He is not a being created in the image of God. Genesis chapter 1, verses 28 to 31. Rather, he is a struggling product of evolution, lacking in definition by substance. He is a product of chance. Émile Durkheim, 1858 to 1917, in his Rules of Sociological Method, 1895, viewed criminals as evolutionary pioneers, exploring by their activities the next step in the evolution of man. Man, for Durkheim, had no fixed nature nor morality. He was an accident of an evolutionary process, and his accidental nature would change and develop with time. For those in this tradition, the criminal is an interesting figure and an important one. It was altogether logical for Jean-Paul Sartre to make a homosexual criminal and hail him as Saint Genet, actor and martyr, 1963. Precisely because for Sartre and Genet, God was denied, the new idea of the sacred was transferred to evil. The dedication to pure evil made Genet sacred in Sartre's eyes. Ibid, pages 215, 216, and 261. God having been denied, there is no longer any true substance in all the universe. The accidental man, by his total dedication to an anti-God faith, affirms thereby the validity of the accident only, and the accident without substance has no point of reference and no meaning. Time, in this framework, has no meaning. Sacred time is cyclical. It is a time of eternal recurrence. Ibid, page 130. The sacred has thus become the meaningless, the evil, not the good. This is the triumph of the accident, and hence of accidental man. Let us consider the meaning of this pure evil, this triumph of the accident over substance. One of the characteristics of life in the Western world since at least 1960 has been the rise of mindless crime. Drive-by shootings, the random killing of innocent people, the ready indulgence and torture of people who have done nothing. Such things are examples of mindless crime, uncaused evil. Now, the Christian ethics has sought to further good for good's sake, not a self-serving virtue, but one motivated by gratitude toward God for His goodness. Rather than a man-centered cause for self-promotion, Christian virtue is required to be goodness for goodness' sake. Virtue is required for virtue's sake. The Christian must not avoid murder, adultery, or theft out of fear of the consequence, but out of a love of God and His moral law, out of a love for virtue. Virginity and chastity are not to be adhered to out of a desire to gain a better spouse, a better reputation, or to avoid disease, but out of a regard for virginity and chastity as the true way of life, for virtue's sake, for the Lord's sake, because He requires it. Now, evil seeks the same purity of dedication to evil. The purely professional criminal is in crime for the money, for profit. He has no desire to do more than steal or kill as necessary. The perpetrators of mindless crime may steal or kill, but their basic objective is evil. A young man who enjoyed seducing and then leaving girls who were virgins responded when someone asked him why he went after some girls who had no special appeal. His response was, he wanted them because they were virgins. The appeal was evil for evil's sake. It was despoiling virtue. The accidental man hates the substantive life, but he wants to prove that it is a fraud by destroying it. In an interview with Fareed Zakaria, managing editor of Foreign Affairs, Lee Kuan Yew, Prime Minister of Singapore, except for an interlude from 1959 to 1990, when he allowed his deputy to succeed him, spoke of the change in the United States and elsewhere that had lessened his admiration and respect. Westerners have abandoned an ethical basis for society, believing that all problems are solvable by a good government, which we in the East never believed possible. Fareed Zakaria, Culture is Destiny, Foreign Affairs, March to April 1994, page 112. Centuries ago, the East was wealthy and powerful, but certain ideas it held had evil consequences. Buddha's belief in ultimate nothingness was destructive of cultural strength and morality. In China, philosophy preceded Hume by many centuries in its epistemological skepticism. One philosopher questioned the real world. He held that it was difficult to say whether or not the, quote, dream, end quote, world, or the, quote-unquote, waking world was real. Such thinking meant cultural paralysis, because, in its own way, it reduced humanity to the level of the accidental man. As reported by the Lofton Letter, according to the George Barna Research Group, 4 out of 10 people who call themselves evangelicals don't believe there is such a thing as absolute truth. Says Barna, it's pretty frightening. Of all US adults, 71% reject the idea of absolute truth. Lofton Letter, March 1994, page 19. To reject absolute truth is to reject Christianity. The only God possible in such a universe, and the only logical Christ, comes out of the cosmic accident. God and Christ, then, if existing, are simply struggling in a cosmic accident to gain some kind of relevance. There can then be no absolute God, no decree of predestination, and no substance to law and morality, nor to man. Because the Western world has become the realm of accidental man, it is in danger of becoming the realm of fading men and fading cultures and nations. Accidental man is oblivious to all this. He believes God to be dead, and, because of this absurdity, he is himself dying.